Hey guys, it's Ornlu, and I know I'm a little bit late on this, but Empire Wars Duo 2 did finish up this past weekend, so it is time for me to do my recap video, talk about, okay, what were the results, what were the notable storylines, what did the actual Age of Empires 2 gameplay look like, and then of course talk about all of the drama and community implications and all of that stuff. So other than just the data itself, this is all just my personal, thoughts from watching most of the tournament. I saw like 95-ish% of it. I only missed like 3 sets. So I really did see most of the games that were played, and of course followed all of the storylines and whatnot as best I could. So definitely let me know what you guys thought about Empire Wars Duo in the tournament down in the description below. Obviously it was hosted by Lidakor, $20,000 Empire Wars tournament 2v2, and he did host one last year, and that was quite popular, so he hosted it again right now. So let's go ahead and see what those results were. Spoiler alert and all that stuff. Click away lest you be spoiled. Alrighty, so here we are on the Wikipedia page for this event. I will post the link for it in the description. It just gives you a nice overview of the entire tournament and all of that good stuff. There were 16 teams that participated. Most had 2 players, but some had 3. But a lot of the teams that had 3 players had one of them not participate. So we had 8 invited teams, 8 qualified teams, and, well, as you might expect in the AoE community, it was 7 out of 8 invited teams making it past the group stage, and 7 out of 8 qualified teams dropping out. The only exception was Vietnam Strategy B edging out a very close set over VNA, which I believe had a lot of weird inter-Vietnamese matches because VNA is ACCM and backed, Vietnam B is Bad Boy and Song Song. They were probably one of the best, if not like the best qualifier team anyway, and so barely edging out in that decider match, and that was really the only sort of upset we saw in the group stage. Everybody else passing through without, I think, too much issue. Then, of course, we have our playoffs. AMB winning pretty comfortably over AMA. The 2 Aftermath teams, Aftermath B is Hera and Leary, and the huge favorites for the tournament, and Aftermath A was Nikov and MBL, so kind of what you would expect from that series. Gamer Legion A won a very close set against Vietnam Strategy B, who once again really did show up for the tournament. Song Song and Bad Boy. Really strong just coordination from them in terms of how they took fights, and they just seemed really sharp, yeah, but Gamer Legion A really closely edged that one out. Heresy over Gamer Legion B, another very close set. It was Miguel and Dogao edging out over Doubt and Slam. Again, a set that on paper you could think would go either way, and in this case it was Heresy who ended up taking it. And then Suomi, I think definitely a bit of an upset, beating White Wolf Palace, so it was the Max and Valessa winning over Mr. Yo and Vivi, Lix unfortunately not participating in this event. Then we had the whole situation where Gamer Legion A, for reasons I will get to in a little bit, could not participate in the semifinals or finals, so Vietnam Strategy B, despite losing in the quarterfinals, made it to the semifinals where they actually, put up a pretty good fight against Hera and Leary. Bad Boy and Song Song, Hera, Leary, you'd think this would be like a 4-0, but no, it was at least a 4-2 in favor of AMB. But I think especially the Arabia game was probably the highlight of the entire tournament. I would definitely recommend checking that one out. And then we saw Heresy and Suomi, a really close set as well. These 2 teams goes all the way back to Nations Cup 2017, where the Finns and the Brazilians tend to put on really good shows against each other, and this was no exception. And then the finals was Aftermath B versus Heresy, which I actually did not watch for, again, reasons I will get to in a little bit. But Aftermath B did end up winning in a pretty decisive set 4-2 over Heresy. Still a good result for Miguel and Dogao. This is like their first finals in quite a while, but going into the tournament, everybody expected Hera and Leary to win. And it's not like they had the world's easiest road, but they were pretty decisively the best team in the tournament, so not too surprising there. Other storylines, nothing too wild, just a little bit of drama here and there. But yeah, that's pretty much it as far as the results go. Nothing too unexpected. So now I want to talk a little bit about, okay, how did the actual gameplay look? And we do have a nice NerFox spreadsheet, which I will get to in just a moment, with all of the specific numbers and stuff like that. But I just want to talk more broadly about, okay, what did we see? And it was a lot of knights and archers, knights and archers, knights and archers, knights and archers on pretty much every single, open land map. And again, I'll talk more about this later. I know I'm talking about a lot of stuff later, but still, for better or for worse, it was the very dominant meta, and the teams that succeeded were the ones that were able to really coordinate fights together. We often saw teams that might have had a very strong individual play or very strong strategies, but just not quite the coordination when it came to taking fights. They ended up falling to the teams that were all about just execution and clean play. Empire Wars definitely exacerbates, I would say, the 2v2 meta, where it's like very ironclad knights and archers. Like Empire Wars takes that up a notch because it's just that much more aggressive. You have that much less time to do anything else, and just scouts plus archers into knights or camels plus archers, they cover their weaknesses perfectly if you can take fights together. And so it just becomes all about taking those fights together. Now, there were several maps where we did not see that meta play out, and that's just because the maps were too wild and crazy for that common meta to really work. And so I'll get to that in just a second, but it was really refreshing to see those maps, in my opinion. To be honest, it gets really, really boring to watch Empire Wars 2v2s. It's just like, okay, it's the same thing, and then one team snowballs a fight in late Feudal Age, early Castle Age, and wins the game. And that's kind of it. I wish there was more to talk about strategy-wise, but really, like, that's just kind of it, you know? You play a good archer civ, a good cavalry civ, and then you go to town. So, I guess, let's go see exactly what I'm talking about on these specific maps. Alright, here is the good old Nerfox spreadsheet. I hid my face because I'm ashamed, and also it kind of hides the relevant statistics. I mean, there's a lot of numbers here being thrown at you, but I'll just try and give you the highlights. For maps, we had Arabia, Atacama, Canberra, Cape of Storms, Forest Pond, Golden Pit, Hidden Treasures, which was like a unique map for the tournament, Kawasan, Riverbelt, and Rock Slide. So already in just looking at the map pool, thinking about it in the 2v2 format, we can kind of break it down to, okay, game number 1 is Arabia, and that's going to be about as meta as you can get, and it always will be. Atacama is going to be very similar, but just a bit more aggressive. Cape of Storms is going to be like even more aggressive, even though it is a hybrid map. Golden Pit's going to be the same thing, but a bit more defensive because it's easier to wall. Kawasan, something fairly similar, although you do have the fish aspect to it. Riverbelt is mostly over in, 5-10 minutes anyway, and then Rock Slide is something that is kind of unique. But at least for half of the maps in the map pool, we do have that archer plus cavalry play that we just see that is so dominant. And that was kind of an issue because the maps that weren't the meta, quote-unquote, maps tended to be played less. So that means we just saw more and more meta. Like Hidden Treasures was played 5 times. Forest Pond, 12 times. Meanwhile, we had Cape of Storms. Oh man, the shame of this tournament. Cape of Storms, it didn't used to be a bad map, but I casted maybe 20 of these 23 games, maybe 21. I saw maybe one good game on this map. Mostly it was just absolutely terrible, terrible games, and it was picked over and over and over again. It's like, oh, it's the Cape of Storms game where one team wins in late Feudal Age, early Castle Age by taking one fight with scouts and archers versus other scouts and archers. Riverbelt also tended to be super snowbally. Golden Pit as well. And it really came down to maps like Canberra, Forest Pond, Hidden Treasures, and Rock Slide for really delivering those good games, just because it forced the teams to do something different. And that's, I think, what the takeaway is when it comes to 2v2, is that if you can force players to do something that isn't meta, things can become really interesting, because then you have sorts of prepared strats, and then you have different army compositions, as you don't have like the 3 to 4 players on a team that can just make one unit and sort of cover all of the other strengths. If Knights plus Archers doesn't work, you really are going to have to utilize more of a Civ's tech tree than you would in any sort of larger game mode, which is what makes 2v2 interesting. It's kind of like late game, you see 1v1 army compositions, but with trade, so you have more gold units. And I think that's where 2v2 is at its most interesting. It's just so hard to get there, especially in Empire Wars. That said, as far as the civs go, definitely take these with like a grain of salt, because there are only so many games that are actually played in the tournament. But still, if we look at the noteworthies here, first thing that stands out, Ethiopians going 9-2, banned or sniped, 25 times? 82% win rate. Ethiopians are just insane in Empire Wars. Another thing to point out is that the Empire Wars balance is much worse than RM because the game is balanced around RM and not Empire Wars. And Ethiopians, because they do start with plus 100 food and gold, they're just incredibly strong, and of course they do the meta thing very, very well, so that is all good for them. Magyars, another civ, 70% win rate. They love not having to start in the Dark Age because they don't have an eco bonus, so they can just go right into their scouts. In terms of like very popular civs, we had Berbers doing quite well. Again, later in the game that the game starts, if that makes sense. Later ages, Berbers tend to be a bit happier, so they were very popular and fairly successful. Byzantines were not very successful, but they weren't really played on like the more open maps. They were played on the more atypical maps. Chinese, a little bit below average, especially because you don't get that eco bonus with your extra villagers in Empire Wars. Cumans were kind of their own weird thing. Franks not performing as well as you might expect, but still the sample size isn't that gigantic. Incas were 6-1, although with not that many games played, but that's just kind of interesting that they did so well, especially because they're not a civ that you really would expect to jump out in Empire Wars. And just skipping ahead here, Mayans, 9-14. Incas were 6-1. Incas clearly better 2v2 civ than Mayans. No, not really, but that's still interesting and worth mentioning. Indians not very successful. Having that camel play just means that if your enemy is in a strong spot as far as their archers go, then it's going to be really, really rough for you. So yeah, Indians I think are super overrated in 2v2s, much more of a 3v3 and 4v4 civ as far as pocket goes. Italians were quite successful, but again, those are on the more atypical maps. Khmer as well, interestingly. They performed pretty well in a variety of different maps, actually. They were kind of used all over the place. Magyar, as already said, Malians not doing so well. I don't really see them as a strong 2v2 Empire War civ. Mongols were mostly played on Cape of Storms. They were... Where do we see Mongols? Mongols. Cape of Storms. Were all their games? Yeah. I think all of their games were on Cape of Storms. Or something. No, most of them were, but yeah. Mongols were good civ on that map because there's lots of hunt. That's the point. Persians also played a lot in Cape of Storms, but they weren't as impressive, honestly. 2-6 on that map. It's just, the game is over way too quickly before Persians can really get rolling. Saracens, we saw a decent amount. They were banned a lot, but, still had some success. Vietnamese having a ton of success. And this is an interesting one. Oh, Slavs also not doing very well. Again, it's just too fast of a game mode for Slavs to really kick in. Vietnamese really excelling in the Empire Wars thing because the fights happen so quickly, and you just getting those eco upgrades is so powerful, and then having that extra HP on your archers, 2 more hits to be killed from both Feudal Age archers and Scout Cavalry, it really makes a massive difference in those early fights, and then it's just about snowballing it from there. So the civs that we can see being the most successful, Vietnamese, Magyars, Burgundians were pretty successful as well. Where are even Incas, Ethiopians especially? These are the civs that are like fast, like about as fast as humanly possible, and that is what Empire Wars 2v2 is all about. As far as like the specific maps go, there really aren't enough games on really any of them to take away anything super, super strong, especially on the more oddball maps. But we saw a decent smattering of results in different civs, notably Bohemians, Poles, and then, where are they? Goths were not played at all. Lithuanians only played once. But other than those 4 civs, everything else was played at least a semi-okay amount. Burmese, I guess, were only played a few times. But again, we're looking at least 5 to 7 games for most other civs. So that's pretty decent, and that's just kind of what you get from a very large, in-depth draft like that. So those are the statistics, and at least as far as I am seeing my analysis, such as it is, for the overall games. Alright, so here's where the juice happens as far as these videos go. Empire Wars Duo 2 in the AoE 2 community, as I put it. First, I just want to say that 2v2 in Empire Wars, I know I've kind of hinted at it, if not more explicitly. I just don't think it's very good. It's not very entertaining. I don't think players enjoy it that much. I'm not going to say that there weren't any good games, because there were. There were actually several very good games. Were those games made good by the Empire Wars format? Did Empire Wars make those games good? No, not at all. Because most of the good games went long. There weren't really any good short games. And then 2v2, it's just knights and archers, knights and archers, knights and archers. And I feel like we just don't have a lot of variety. And Age of Empires without that sort of strategic aspect, I feel like is just a little bit lackluster as far as the viewer experience goes. Obviously, it's Lida's tournament. He can host whatever he wants. But at least personally, it's just not something that I really am that interested in seeing more of in the future. But that's just me. Again, feel free to let me know in the comments if you maybe really enjoyed this sort of format. Personally, not a big fan, and I know that a lot of people also not a big fan. So then next we have the Gamer Legion A drama. That is Tato, Jordan, and Nilly. As I alluded to earlier, they did make the semifinals in a very close win over Vietnam B. And then the next day were like, we can't play. So they had to drop out of the tournament at the semifinals. Essentially, Tato posted about it on Twitter. It was an unfortunate series of events involving flying to Germany for Red Bull. And I guess that is a little bit of a downside for the tournament, is that it feels like it was maybe a bit overshadowed by the upcoming Red Bull Willow 5 tournament. But that is what it is. And essentially, Tato, Jordan, and Nilly, they couldn't get together 2 of the 3 of them, as they were going to the Gamer Legion house in Berlin to do some training before Red Bull. And so, yeah, they had to be replaced at the last minute. Unfortunate for the tournament, because those guys are, of course, very popular players, but still, Vietnam B put on a really good show, so, the show must go on, and Vietnam B definitely turned up, even though they didn't expect to be playing, so that was good on them. Last, major point, stream length on the final day. I didn't cast the final set because it was just too long, man. It's the series themselves, the whole day started at 10 a.m. my time, which is actually pretty late. I'm used to starting at 8 or 9 a.m. And it was already getting to 11:30 at night or something when the finals were going to start. I had been live for 6 hours at that point, and I knew my viewer count's dropping, and I was tired, and I was just I really think Age of Empires needs to move away from best of sevens, especially in anything that's more than a 1v1, unless it's the grand finals. Because a lot of people I know weren't able to watch the finals for the tournament just because it was too late at night. It was Sunday. That's a work/school night, so that's just kind of unfortunate. But still, there were a lot of very good sets and closely matched ones as well. So that, you want to have more games, especially if they're high-quality games. But yeah, I feel like there are diminishing returns at some point. And so to round this out, going forward, overall, was the tournament a success? I'm not Lida, I'm not the host of the tournament, but I would imagine he would be pretty happy with it. There were some good games. Viewership was pretty good. And I think it's just a matter of, yes, there are good games, but can we do better? Because if you look at, there are 149 maps played. I didn't know that off the top of my head, I just still have the stats sheet in front of me. If you're only getting 20 to 30 really good games, that means most of the tournament is really underwhelming. And I feel like that's kind of what we got. There were a few standout games, but I'm just not the biggest fan of the settings. And I know a lot of people aren't big fans of that either. But again, let me know what you think in the whole comments section. That's, I guess, my wrap up for Empire Wars Duo 2. It's still a fun tournament. I'm still glad I casted it. So definitely congrats to Lida, and shout out to him for organizing the event. Of course, Nerfox with the spreadsheet, all good as well. And thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.